desert. I loved her so, in the land of enchantment, New Mexico.
The underlying issue that we're facing right now deals with water rights. It is a water right that was established for this property in something called the 1909 decree in a landmark lawsuit for this area, wherein the predecessors entitled to this property were granted a water right that extended to all the users, and it defined the water for all of the users on this stream system. The Tularosa Creek stream system, it does have no outlet to outside this basin. It's a landlocked system, and therefore all the water that flows in the Tularosa stream system is either apportioned to the users on the stream system, or it flows into the Tularosa Basin, goes into the ground, and never leaves the basin at all. A water right is permission to divert water, whether it's from a well or whether it's from an open stream, to be applied, and the standard is called beneficial use. In other words, you have to be able to show that you're diverting water for some kind of benefit. And whether it's through irrigating crops, whether it's providing water for livestock.
All water in the state belongs to the public. And the right to beneficially use water is what's referred to as a water right. And the owner of a water right, or a water right owner, doesn't necessarily own the water. They own the right to beneficially use that water. And the water rights are considered property rights, private property rights, meaning that they can be bought, sold, leased. They can be transferred if they have the water right owner has the correct permit or authorization from the state engineer's office. Beneficial use of water, I like to categorize it as it's actually wet water. It's a term that folks don't really recognize, and it's wet water being put on the ground or being used for some beneficial purpose, and you don't really have a water right until you beneficially use the water. Now, that being said, there's three elements to a water right. The first is the point of diversion. You have to have, where you're going to pump that water, where you're going to divert it off of a canal or a river, creek, a stream. Purpose of use, pretty obvious, but that's another element of the water right. Is it going to be irrigation, domestic, commercial, industrial? There's a number of different purposes of use out there. And then in a place of use, where's that water going to be applied? Where's it going to be beneficially used? So, we consider those the three elements of a water right in order to beneficially use it and establish an actual water right. And if you change any of those elements, any of the three elements that I mentioned, you have to acquire a permit from the state engineer's office to do so.
Downstream users. And by downstream users, I'm talking about the municipal village, Tularosa, downstream from us, and the downstream water users in the form of the Tularosa Community Ditch Cooperation. Well, their claim is that we no longer have a water right, that through the passage of time from our being granted a water right in 1909 up until the present day, that during that ensuing time period, we had abandoned our water right. And therefore, we are not entitled to use any more water. In other words, we're not entitled to divert water for irrigation purposes anymore. Prior to 1960, we were able to show we had continuously used the water. In 1982, we decided to install a pipeline to bring our water to our property. And at that point, the downstream users took note of the fact. And then they brought the suit against us that alleged that we had, prior to 1982, abandoned our water right and attempted to take it through court, through legal means, and deny us the use of our water. In 2020, the state engineer declared that we had never in fact ever lost our water right because we had never in fact abandoned it. And therefore, our right was still preserved as under the 1909 agreement in what they call a senior water right. I mean, it's equal to any other water right on the stream system.
I looked up the Davalos case and the many fragments of it. And I also looked up and read more than once a file about that thing, of just legal documents. So I became familiar with that. At the time, there was also another legal case that had been on for over 10 years with a water user further upstream, that'd be east in the system. And I realized that a 25 to 30 year lawsuit over something that had been decided in the early turn of the century and then reopened in the 1930s, reopened in the 1950s, reopened in the 1960s, and then again in the 80s, didn't make much sense. So I started reading and then got familiar with the case, and I realized there was no merit. In my opinion, that was the conclusion I came to. And also realized on the startings of an appeal that the previous commissioner started, but never didn't follow through on yet because they were still waiting for the state engineer's determination of affirmation of water rights or not. That the case had been settled in 2017. But yet, looking at the budget, why was the lawyer still being paid? And then the next question is, how is the lawyer being paid when there's no actions? Then the amount of legal fees started looking up. This is a very small acequia that tier 2 for the state of New Mexico, which means they make less than $60,000 a year. So carrying on a legal case for over 25 to 30 years is very prohibitive. So then August of that same year, 2020, is when the state engineer determined the Davalos family. And the case was determined that there was enough water to supply the water rights that were in question. And also that they affirmed the diversion for the Davalos farm and Davalos family. So then it was pretty much a done deal. I mean, the state engineer approved it. And at that point, in 2017, district court judge also said that the Davalos family prevailed. Then the resistance started all again. Big pressure to appeal the whole situation. So not only in my findings, and also the determination I came to upon reading these files and becoming more familiar, there was no, why waste more money after the determination was already done? That's the conclusion I came to.
When they became commissioners, nobody else wanted to be commissioners, and the old commissioners wanted out. Okay, I guess they were fed up. But they didn't expect things to happen the way they were. So they nominated and pushed into the new commission Kathy, Robert, and Harleen. They selected them. So at the election, they said, I nominate so-and-so. Somebody said, I second it, and they were in. Okay, no votes, that I recall. Anyway, I don't recall them taking it, but they were just, okay, I second that, and they were made commissioners. As things went on, and they started finding things that were wrong with the way that the ditch commission was being run, or that were left out, omitted, records wrong, whatever, and they started trying to straighten them out. Okay, and in some instances, one of the previous commissioners' wives got all upset about an issue when there was a complaint issue that she was using more water than anybody else. It was investigated, and well, it started going downhill from then. Okay, that's my opinion. They had tried everything in the world after that to put a roadblock in front of the current commission. They wouldn't allow them to do their jobs, including the bookkeeper, not giving them access to QuickBooks for payroll and for everything, just accounting. They wound up having to change the locks, and the accusations would come up. And what tipped it over for me one day, I came in from irrigating or doing whatever it was, and she had been called by another lady that she wanted to bring over her proxies. Now, proxies are someone signing over their voting rights to an individual. But she said, okay. So when I came in from the field that day and I saw the look on her face, she was kind of like wondering what's going on, you know. There was 2 previous commissioners, the lady that had called her initially, and then the wife of one of the commissioners there. They had, I don't know how many, I didn't count them, proxies. And they were in a hurry, they were pushing her, and she was wondering why they were there. So she doesn't speak up very much for herself, so I did. I asked him.
I did.
I says, what's the deal here? So, oh, we're just giving her our proxies. And I says, all of you? I says, it was my understanding it was only going to be one, I don't know if I can say her name or not. It was only going to be one person. And so, oh, well, we just decided to help. And I says, that sounds to me, I said, like intimidation. That's because there's too many of you, and 2 of you are commissioners. So hang on a second, let me get a piece of paper and we'll start taking notes. They didn't like that too much. One of the commissioners even made a comment that they weren't intimidating, and they were just there to present the proxies. And I says, well, it's my understanding and my impression, I says, that you're intimidating her. I says, so I want to take notes. And she said, well, it's not intimidation. I says, you know what? I said, your interpretation of that is different than mine, okay? And I'm seeing it as that. As a matter of fact, let's hold off on the meeting. I'm going to call the other commissioner, because at that time there was only 2. One of them had resigned. So I did, and things got a little warm then, okay? But the wife of this one commissioner was a very aggressive person and ready to fight, actually. So at any rate, that is what started me
Getting
very involved, okay, with not only the things that were trying to go on. I was trying to help, okay, and the more I heard, the more I realized that, you know, these people were just out for their own benefit.
There was a list, and it was one of the former commissioners that had done this list based off other lists that had existed before that. And as I looked this list over, where I said earlier, if a water right is $1, some of the water rights were $1.25. So that can't happen. That's not a thing. So there was a lot of inconsistencies and unknowns, and there was written, does this belong to this ? Was this person's, or did they lease from here ? There was a lot of inconsistencies. So I decided to clarify all that. The former commissioners made a lot of claims, and I got to looking in the books and I couldn't verify what they were saying. And on questioning them and looking at some of the documentation, realized that they had no idea what was in those books. And this went back to who knows how long. But the water rights are literally stock in the company of the Tularosa Community Ditch Cooperation. And this is the inventory in the warehouse. They didn't even know what was there, much less how to verify what was there. So I took it upon myself personally to take all the water rights and through all 11 of the books from the 1902, and I went from conception of everybody's water rights to current owners. And I documented every single hand that water right passed through to legitimize, because the problem with the water rights is if they stayed intact, meaning a whole water right, say a water right's $1. If it stayed as $1, it was fine. It was pretty easy to track. But if they broke it up and now you have 10 dimes and a 50-cent piece, now you have 6 stories of where those water rights went, and they bounced around a lot. So it took a better part of a year for me to do all of this. And I tracked every single one of them. And in the end of it, I learned all kinds of stories about how they put up the water rights during the Depression as collateral on their farms. Some of them got them back, and some of them lost that with their farms. So I began to see when Catron was taken out of the picture before the water rights certificate started, that people moved in to fill that spot, and they continued the control and dominance of those water rights through the system. Some of them have been in the same families for generations. Same control, same dominance, same manipulation of the system. So I was able to see all that because I've read the stories from the beginning to the end.
My husband was the village trustee, and when he passed away, there was a lawsuit with the Tularosa Community Ditch and my husband at that time. And they were they had taken to court one of the people along here in Bent that was stealing water. He didn't have a water right. He is pumping it out from the ditch and filling up ponds. And so he had been going to court to hearings on that. And so I asked the state engineer if I could continue that battle. So I had been going for about 2 years to hearings in Santa Fe on that. And so because I was involved in a prior lawsuit, that's why they asked me to be on there. So I had some experience, and they just felt like, I think they were getting, 2 of the commissioners were ill. One had previously been ill. She was still fighting, but they had other interests, and that's why they were looking for commissioners they felt were trustworthy. I think they very well liked us at first, and they wanted us to take over, and they knew we were going to do a good job. But that a year ago in January is when it all came to head, that them coming over to bring proxies, and for some reason they just didn't want us to be commissioners anymore. And so I was involved in that hearing with that, and I went till that person dropped out. He had 2 or 3 lawyers and wasn't able to win, and so, but he still is taking water, but you know, we weren't successful at getting him to stop taking water. But that's where the Wild West comes in. When that came to their attention, one of the commissioners and my husband came along the creek trying to figure out why had the water stopped flowing. And they came up to this guy's property, and they were going to tell him, you know, you don't have a water right, you can't use it. And he brought out a rifle and told them, you know, no, I have water. I have a right to this water. I don't have a water right, but I have a right. And so he, at gunpoint, told them to leave his land. And so they had to have a sheriff come, and that's what led to the suit starting. And I was just very involved in continuing. I was born and raised in Tularosa. We always saw the water flowing in the irrigation ditches. I was now a water user. I had a water right. And so we appreciate that. And I just want to continue to see that water flow in Tularosa.
My home is located in the original 49 blocks in Tularosa, and that is the location of the original town site, which was basically 7 streets by 7 streets. And back then, families were allotted land within the 49 blocks. And it's a really special place because it has irrigation rights. So we're able to use the irrigation water to irrigate our property. And so this particular area of town is very green and lush. There's lots of trees and roses, and it's a really special place. So when I bought this house, the water right came with the property. And whether I choose to use the water or not, I have to pay for that right, which isn't very much per year. And then we're allotted a certain amount of time and a certain day to get the water. So I have water every other Monday. And we have to communicate with our neighbors to schedule when we're getting the water. So before I get water, my neighbor gets it. And when he's done, he tells me, hey, I'm gonna give you water now. And then he'll open his gate and it'll come into my yard. And then all the neighbors before him do the same thing. So we have to talk to each other, communicate with each other, and then just be good stewards, you know, to make sure the water doesn't flood over out into the street, or we're not using it for too long or too much. Just trying to, you know, not be greedy with it. And everybody works together to communicate and get the water and open and close the ditches. The fees are paid annually, and it fluctuates depending on what size of lot you have, because naturally, if you have more water coming in to irrigate your property, then the fee is going to be a little higher. And I pay about $50 a year for my water fees. Here in Tularosa and in the Southwest in general, water is life. We depend on water, you know, for drinking water, for our gardens, to provide water for our livestock, for our crops. And my family has been here for generations, and they've always depended on the water. We're very lucky here, and I think it's a privilege to have irrigation rights. And so I'm able to use that water and bring it into my property so that I don't have to use the city water. And I can use it to have green grass and have a beautiful place to live and have trees. And I'm very thankful to have that right. And I was brought up to be a good steward of the land, and that includes being a good steward of the water. So I take a great responsibility with having that right.
I had just gone through a pretty bad divorce. COVID had hit. I was in the South, and I had gone through another tornado. And I thought, you know what? I'm going home. I'm going home. When I came home, I was intending to stay. What came with it, I wasn't expecting. It was an unexpected silver lining because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about my father, I learned a lot about myself, I learned a lot about my mother, I learned a lot about tenacity and passion. I learned what mattered. So when I moved back home, I just dove in, all in. You know, no turning back, because I'm not going anywhere else. I'm not letting go of this piece of land. I'm not going to let the hard work of my father and my mother go in vain, and I'll continue to fight. You know, I don't think that people realize when they involve themselves in other people's lives, they think at some point they're going to give up. But they forget that there's a new generation. And they forget that there's another generation that may be more passionate and have more time and be more educated. I was very fortunate to meet Robert and Kathy and Diana. I was very fortunate to be able to have conversations with them and to be able to knock down those barriers, to be able to have a conversation and to discuss openly fears, hopes, the future. And I thought we had turned a corner. You know, I thought we had, as a community, found the silver lining. And I still think that's the hope for all of us, you know, by doing something like this, by lifting the veil and not being so secretive and making things more transparent. So the journey has been, in my mind, it has been successful. There's been a lot that has been aired. There's been a lot that has come to the surface, and it will continue to do so because there's more voices and there's more people involved. And as we mentioned before, the majority will rule out. And I think we're starting to become the majority.